Hi there. Welcome back to the channel, and of course, welcome back to my space. So I wanted to make one last video about the build. Of course, if I end up upgrading the tuners or doing anything else, I'll make a video on that. But I've kind of finally ended the run on the Flying V as far as documenting it, because I think I finally got it correct. And I've got it playing correctly as far as it intonates now. This string was jumping out of the nut. Solved that. I replaced the bridge, the original bridge. Then I got a Goto. Then after I messed that up, I ended up going with the Tone Pros. So I wanted to go over a few things that happened and just sort of like document the process, because I think it could potentially help someone out there who's got a kit and they're just like stuck. Because the more I've read about it online, like some of the groups I've joined on Facebook and elsewhere, it's a reality that when you buy these things, buy a kit, especially like one of these types of guitars, like this Flying V, like an Explorer kit, set neck kits, there's more potential for mistakes. There's more potential that the kit will be routed kind of funky, not exactly right, or shaped a little funky. I've noticed some of that with this guitar. It's not completely symmetrical as far as the shaping goes. Close enough for me, but I can see people, complaining about that. And, with this one, this insane rake angle that happens here, and it happens on Flying Vs in general, but my concern was that perhaps this one was just a little more extreme, like just a little bit more extreme than average. There's that kind of stuff. Also, they usually route these for metric routing. A lot of guys like the original kind of Gibson routing better, that kind of thing. So my opinion now, and I mentioned this in a video that I made before, the last one I posted, I think that for the money, you might be better off building Strat type builds or Tele type builds, Fender builds, because you can access the parts easier. You can get a real Fender neck, a real Fender body, make sure that they match up as far as dimensions go, and they almost always do. There's a few exceptions, of course, but once you find out which parts made up, like Telecaster necks and Stratocaster necks don't really work on each other. I think you can put a Strat on a Tele, but you can't put a Tele on a Strat, that kind of thing. Once you figure out those sorts of things, and there's certain neck pockets that are different, but most of it is standardized. So you can pick out all your parts and put it together and have less potential for weird problems to emerge, especially if you get like Fender license bodies and necks. And so that's what I was thinking of doing. And because I think that I can get more, I can get results that are more predictable with that type of build. But this guitar ended up working out great and sounding great, and I'm very happy that I got it. I learned a lot, and I really think it's going to be a great guitar. I mean, this is really nice mahogany wood. The engineered rosewood on the fretboard I like. This is a 12-inch radius neck, so it has kind of like that modern sort of flattish feel that feels really good. It's a pretty slim neck. It's like a slim kind of Gibson profile. And it sounds fantastic. It's very resonant. I used hide glue to set the neck, and it just feels incredible. It sounds great. So I'm happy with the sound. The sustain is incredible. I've never owned a guitar that vibrates like this when I play it. I mean, it's just so resonant, incredible. And I'm gonna assume that that's because of the stain. The stain is such a thin finish on the guitar. And I've done a little bit of reading on that. And, I think a lot of times that's why guys that relic their guitars ended up liking the way they sound, because they removed a lot of the finish. And so the wood has, a real chance to vibrate and breathe. And so I've gotten really into that. I think that's what makes this guitar sound as good as it does, is because it was stained instead of, having a coat of nitro or poly put on it. So those are the things I learned. I learned that I love staining guitars. I learned that I love building guitars because I can set it up specifically for my interests, my desires, the things that I'm into, like staying, P94 pickups, things that you don't find in your average guitar. You can get more imaginative with the design. Even though you're using basically a classic design that's been around for 60 years, you can still make it your own to a certain extent, And you can add trim, you can just customize and do your own electronics and all that kind of thing. So all of that was positive. And I'm very glad that I built this particular guitar because it taught me a bunch of lessons. And I'm really excited in the way hide glue ended up setting the neck. I really think that there's something about the sound transfer there. I've never heard or felt anything quite like a staying guitar with hide glue. I'm telling you, it's the vibration levels. It's just insane. It just feels so alive. And it sounds great. Here are the problems that I had. Okay, so when I got the guitar, the body was pretty good. There was a little dead spot here. Don't ever sand down a dead spot. It just makes it worse. I should have just left that as it is. But overall, everything was pretty good. The neck was good. The frets were level. Everything was fine. It came with the nut that came with the guitar. Standard nut. I upgraded to a Tuss nut. That's what I want to give advice on. I think the nut might be the most important part of the kit. The nut, then maybe the bridge. Those are my, and the neck adjustment. I think those three things are potentially the most problematic. And if you get them right, you've unlocked the most potential that the instrument can ever have. So if you get your nut right, you get this bridge set up correctly so that the height is correct, so you don't have intonation issues, and then you get your neck adjusted so that you don't have too much relief or not enough. Those three things working together, I think, is what makes a guitar play correctly and sound right and intonate and all that kind of stuff. So I upgraded to the better nut. Now, here's where my trouble started. The first thing that happened is when I took the nut off and upgraded it, it was very difficult to determine where to put the nut. Because remember, it came with another nut. A plastic nut was installed. I had meant to bring that nut in here today, and I was going to show it to you, because the string spacing is actually different on that nut. The string spacing on that nut is tighter in so that the strings would be closer together and there'd be even more of an angle coming from the nut to the tuning posts on these outer strings, especially the low E and the high E. So when I put the Tuss nut on, it now put the strings pretty far out to the edge of the neck. And this is the nut that they recommended. They sent it, when you click the upgrade. So they're assuming, and I'm assuming, that it works for the guitar. And it does, but that's where things got very difficult. The neck here, as I was saying, the neck and the headstock, there's slightly more here than there is here. And this neck gets really thin up here as it heads towards the headstock. They don't call this an arrow headstock for nothing, because it gets very long and sharp here, and this neck here gets really small. And it's almost too small. I think it's just almost too small. I mean, these strings are right on the edge. It's okay, but there was no room to mess around. It had to be perfect. And you're setting it with super glue or something that will really hold that thing in place, so you don't have a lot of time to set it up. So anyway, I set up the nut, set everything up. This is after the initial build. Put the strings on. The first thing that really started going wrong for me immediately was this low E string popping out. So you would try to play something like, not even aggressively, but it would just be like, boom, just pop out. So, not having any experience, what was my solution? I started trying to slot the nut so that the string would drop down low enough and not pop out. I figured that was the best solution. I looked down here at the bridge. I tried lifting that up to give it a little bit more of an angle. Next thing that happens. So that problem wasn't fully solved, but I did get the string to stay in by just going deeper into the slot and lifting this up a bit. Now we're over here. When I go to bend strings, any of these strings I'd be bending up, you know, like this, jumping out of their tracks, just jumping out of the saddles. Okay, so now I lift that up a bit. Now I've got crazy high action, not jumping out of the saddles anymore. So then I go and try to adjust the neck, and I sort of try to accommodate the new setup. String starts jumping out again. So what I did, and I've got the Duesenberg on here, and that was starting to lean forward and get all crazy. I had 11s on it also. So here's what I did to sort of reset the guitar and start over and try to figure out how to get this thing set up, you know, so that I could actually play it. I was beginning to get extremely nervous, like extremely worried that I just made a piece of wall art, that I was never going to get it intonated. It was never going to play right. I'm pretty aggressive with my instruments when I go out and play. Obviously, I probably won't play another show for the rest of this year. But when I play shows and when I'm on stage, I find that I lose the ability to control my emotions, you know, especially my rambunctious nature with my instruments. And I start windmilling and swinging around and just rocking and going crazy. I can't really risk taking a guitar out that's going to jump out of the nut or do any, you know, foolish things like this. I just don't have time for it. It's not going to happen. So this guitar has to really, really be rock solid in order for me to be able to play it live. Otherwise, it's just going to be a, you know, a stay at home and be a chord queen, you know, that to just sit around and play pretty chords. That's about all you can do with it, because you sure as heck can't take it out, you know, play it very aggressively. So I was getting that really like frustrated / like scared feeling that I'd just really blown it, and that I was going to be embarrassed, you know, at least to myself, that I'd got this guitar and couldn't make it work. You know, it's like a point of pride to at least be able to get through it and have like a working instrument. You know, you feel like a complete, you know, loser. So I knew that it was gonna take some effort, and I was trying to avoid giving up and taking it to my local expert, you know, or my luthier. I've got a place I go to here in Phoenix City called American Guitar Boutique, and a guy named Tim that owns the place, Tim O'Brien, and he's helped me with several guitars and setups, and so I know I could take it to him, and somebody there could do it if he can't do it, and it would be probably working great. But I knew that if I did that, then I'm missing a step, and I'm gonna, you know, not learn the thing that I need to learn. So I was determined to try to fix it myself. So the next thing I do now is I realized that the strings are jumping out. And on the old one with the bridge, what I ended up doing was trying to slot the bridge deeper the same way that I just was slotting the nut, just making things sit in these tracks deeper so they won't pop out. But now I'm getting like this weird flangey noise because I did it too much, you know? So I replaced that bridge, and there's a video about that. And I put this amazing Tone Pros bridge on here, this locking bridge, which I love. I actually need to screw these Allen screws down. I was adjusting it and I remember now that the little Allen wrench for that, because the screw is so tiny, is really little. It's hard to get it in there. It's hard to even see the hole. So I need to tighten that back down. But even without it tightened down, when you use the trim, the bridge does not rock back and forth, which is why I replaced it. Not to mention because I had slotted it and screwed it up. But when I noticed that the bridge was rocking, I thought the locking bridge would eliminate that issue, and it did. And this thing is rock solid. I love it. But at this point, I changed the bridge. I have my intonation slammed all the way as far as it's going to go, and I'm still sharp. I'm sharp on intonation. I'm jumping out of the track. This thing is just whacked. It's just ruined, screwed. So at the suggestion of my wife, she's way smarter than I am. Hey, why don't you just try putting the stop piece on, you know? And I was like, well, I actually have thought of that, but blah, blah, blah. Then I just decided, you know what could it hurt? So I took the Duesenberg off. I grabbed the stop piece from the kit, put the strings back on without the Duesenberg. It looked really cool. Looks cool without this Duesenberg on there. It's just like stripped down. It looks awesome. And the other thing that's cool about a Les Paul if you just kind of grab the wings over here and you can go the other way too. So you can kind of get like a vibrato trim thing going just with the instrument itself. So that's kind of cool, but I like having the Duesenberg on there. But anyway, so I went back to one, got it, put the stop piece on, set the guitar up, and it basically was behaving the same way. So then I thought, well, the problem isn't with the Duesenberg. Everything's okay there. I was still sharp on intonation. It looked cool. It played okay. It's fine. But now I had no trim, and it didn't help. I was still having trouble with intonation. So I took the stop piece back off, put the Duesenberg on, and I strung it starting with the high strings just so that I wouldn't immediately like pull it out of whack, just trying to keep it, because it moves forward, you know, a bit. But there's a point where it starts looking wrong, like it's lifted up and really pulled forward, which is why I went to 10s. So I don't know. I may have to play 10s on this. I don't know. So anyway, I got the Duesenberg back on, and I'm still going sharp. So I'm looking at the nut, and I'm also still jumping out. So I get my files out, and I start to cut in a little bit, and I'm going very slowly because I've already screwed up a couple nuts doing this. So I'm going slowly. I get the string, and all of a sudden the string at a certain point the string intonates. And I'm like, okay, I'm already slammed all the way with the bridge. I've got my neck adjusted correctly. I can tell I'm not fretting out, and it just feels right. You can tell when it gets right. It just kind of happens, and you can tell, and you're like, okay, the neck is correct. I don't want to mess with that anymore. And that was getting me close to the intonation. I was just still off. I mean, remember, I've got the bridge all the way. So I noticed that from this neck adjustment and now trimming into this, I'm able to get the string to not jump out. And suddenly, it's intonating. Suddenly, it's intonating. Which I've been waiting for that forever. So I can play chords down here and it won't be out of tune. You know, because I like to muff the strings and get down here sometimes and chick, 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 chick. And you want it to be in tune, right? I don't want any of those hassles. Suddenly it was working. And I'm like, oh, wow. So the height of the nut, you get your bridge right, get that set up correctly, get it as low as you can, because I like to have things touching the wood down as close to the wood as possible. Neck adjustment, so it there's like a point where it feels right. And with this guitar, maybe an optical illusion, but because there's not any guitar body around it, you can really kind of, when you're playing it, you can tell how far you have the neck bowed and how much relief you have. You can almost like see it. It's really weird. I've never had a guitar be like that before, but that's something I've noticed with this V. Could be like that with all Flying Vs, or it could just be me and my perception. I have no idea. But I knew I had the neck right. I was happy with how the bridge was working out. I was just not intonating. I'm still sharp. So when I go to play this, instead of it being in tune, I'm looking at the tuner. I don't know if you'll be able to see it from over there, but instead of being out of tune, well, it's out of tune. But anyway, instead of being out of tune, it was actually working. It was actually working. So I'm like, oh, wow. Now I went through each string. Went to the A string, just a little. You got to go slow, and I used my thinnest file. I want to get some proper nut files because I think mine are too thick, and you don't want to make it look ugly by making the tracks too big. Plus, it could probably make it not effective, and over time, your nut will wear down faster. So I carved here, got the low E to intonate. Did a little more filing on the A, got my string height right. I saw a guy on a Fender Tech. He had some feeler gauges, and he had like the 664 and the 364 thing, because 664 on the E side, this is Fender spec, is about right at the 12th fret, and 3/64 on the higher E. So I got my feeler gauges out that I use for a car, and I started doing adjustments with the nut. So just carving in the nut, getting the string, and then I would check intonation. So as the string came down just a little, I mean, we're talking, micro adjustments, very small. Can't even really tell that anything's changed up here. You can on this low E string, because that kind of became a bungle. But the rest of them, you can't tell that you've done a little carving to drop that string height. And then I would check the intonation. And it was coming in perfectly. So I think that the ultimate fix for this, I've thought a couple of things about the intonation, and the string popping out of the nut. I noticed that I found a German guitar, antique kind of guitar, vintage old guitar, classic guitar, but not a well-known guitar brand, German make. And they've got a thing running across here that's like a one long string tree, that the strings would run through underneath. And it was just a bar that went all the way across, and it really straightened up this angle. And I think playing around with that could help intonation, and it would definitely solve the jumping out of the nut. Because at one point, I kept adjusting the nut to get the intonation right, and then all of a sudden, I introduced string buzz on the E string. So instead of having to replace the entire nut, even though I have a brand new one waiting for me if I need to, instead of having to go to all that trouble and risk not, having new problems, I went back to my baking soda and super glue trick, and I lifted it back up just a little bit, and then it was perfect. Not jumping out. The intonation is solid. This string is slightly higher than the other ones, and I think that has something to do with just some off neck construction, something about this rake angle, because everything else sounds perfect. So I'm trying to be aggressive and really kind of like land on that E. So it's staying in tune, and it's not hopping out. But I'm telling you, it was a major journey. So I guess if you've made it through this long video that I sort of meandered through, the main point of it that I want to express to people is don't give up. Don't get discouraged. Don't give up. And before, you always can take unless you really do something terrible, you're going to be able to take the guitar to somebody that knows what they're doing, and they're going to get it right for you. So with that in mind, keep trying on your own. Keep learning, because you won't learn anything if you have somebody else do it for you, right? So that's what I tried to do. And I have a feeling I'm not done learning yet, because something else will happen, and I'll have to deal with that. But right now, I feel really good about it. And I think that my overall assessment is you can do better money-wise if you do like Fender licensed stuff. I know that you can also buy Gibson bodies, sometimes with the body and the neck are stripped. It's a chance. I've noticed on the Stratosphere they had a Firebird that I'm interested in, because it's only $899 for the body, and that has the whole neck through thing. And then you would just build everything else. You'd put your pickup, do all your electronics, do all the little finish things. Some of them are dinged up a bit, so you could do a little finish work. But then you would have a real instrument with a serial number and the whole deal, that would be resellable if you want to sell, later if you change your mind, or if you want to use it to, buy another instrument, which is what musicians almost always do. So I think you could probably sell these for a little bit of money. You know, if you found somebody that wanted it, you could get a couple bucks back. But I think that you end up kind of throwing money away a bit with a kit, and you're leaving a lot of things that are out of your control. Like when you do it, when you buy the parts yourself, you can pick each element and make sure that each element is exactly what you want, as opposed to with a kit, it's a little bit of a grab bag thing, and you're never quite sure, if the source that you're getting the kits from, where they're getting from, where the wood's coming from, what factory it came from, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where I'm sitting right now. I could change my mind, but I think as opposed to kits, I'm going to go more for restoration jobs and parts casters, like Strats, Tellys, that type of thing. The next project I'm going to do is I'm going to upgrade the potentiometers on my Stratocaster, the little red Squire that I've done videos on, because I love the way it sounds. I really like the pickups. They have the ceramic magnets that are on the opposite sides of the pole pieces, sort of like a P90 design, and I really like the way those sound. So I want to see what kind of improvements I get from replacing the stock pots. So that'll be the next bit of work I do. We'll do a little soldering, take the pick guard off, flip out those pots, and see what kind of tonal improvement we get. So anyway, this kind of closes the chapter on this build. I hope I may be back with new problems, but I just want to offer some encouragement. I didn't have any experience. I don't think I have any special skills. I probably have skills that were the opposite of being good at this. So anyone can do this, and don't give up. Just keep messing around, keep looking at videos, keep reading, keep researching. There's so much great information on YouTube. There's so much great information everywhere. People are, and it seems like guitar people really are cool about sharing their information. It's a community of sorts, and the luthiers and the people that have a lot of experience seem to be very willing to dispense knowledge and teach those of us who are new to this stuff. So anyway, thanks again for watching. Build your guitar, build your kit. Don't give up. It's going to be great. Just don't give up on it. You're going to make it work. Thank you. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.